Hi guys. So my headset stopped working and I lost apparently at some point over the past few weeks a charging cable for my tablet pen that was going to help me with, maybe adding some more interesting interactive features. But due to technical difficulties, it looks like this lecture is going to continue to be just a boring slideshow. I'll let you know if I can resolve that, or you'll see, I guess, in future videos if I can resolve that issue. But for now, I just want to get through a couple more slides and some lectures to get that all set up for you. So we're just going to jump right back into it. Um, so, sorry, message. So I'm going to jump back into the lecture as we were, which we stopped here. We were talking about engagement and flow states. And I'm not in a very good flow state right now, kind of distracted and frustrated due to my many issues. So, kind of losing, kind of in this anxiety stage up here. But we're going to go ahead and move on to talking about the importance of emotions at work, and specifically through the lens of a theory that is probably the most cited, emotions and work theory, which talks about um, how emotions are influenced by work, and then likewise emotions go back to influence work. So starting off, just kind of asking the question, does happiness matter, and does it matter at work specifically? And if you'll remember back towards the beginning of the class, I talked about early IO psychology studies that were interested in whether or not people are happy at work. And that early study found that only 16% of people said they were not happy with their jobs. So that's a low number, and we know, so knowing that for most people they say kind of that they are satisfied or at least moderately satisfied, that's pretty good. Secondly, we know that satisfaction has some correlations with work behavior. So if you're happy with your job, you're going to have better performance and lower withdrawal behaviors. So, and the context of work happiness does kind of matter, because if you're happy, you're going to perform better and you're more likely to show up to work. However, much like many of the other constructs we've talked about recently, there are ways to, come here, Bailey, come here. There are ways to increase happiness at work, like having dogs. So, this is going to be my most disjointed lecture ever. So, so much like other facets of work, if you want a more general or broad outcome, you can look at general or broad job satisfaction. Remember earlier in this lecture, we talked about how you can measure job satisfaction as just generally like one question, are you satisfied with your job? Or you can measure it with more lengthy questionnaires. And they find in most studies that relying on that overall single question measure will often yield smaller results or even non-significant results. So it's best, as with other constructs, to match the specificity of the outcome that you're interested in with the specificity of the measure that you're looking at. So if you want satisfaction with coworkers, you got to ask about that, not just broad and so on and so forth. This particular study, however, was, I believe, German, and so it was not translated to English and not done in the United States. So we probably should do that, but I would imagine that the results would translate to America or other places. So the main theory about how emotion and mood work at work is affective events theory, which I believe I mentioned during class in our last class. And it talks about how, as I mentioned, work, or specifically events at work, any things that happen to you at work, whether they be good or bad, will result in emotions and mood states. And those emotions and mood states then predict your work attitudes and how you perform at work. Specifically because those attitudes are thought to predict behaviors at work. So you basically have kind of like an event. See, I can still do this with the mouse, which leads to emotion or mood, emotion or mood, which then leads to work attitude, which then leads to work behavior. And interestingly, of course, these work behaviors can sometimes come back and lead to work events, because the things you do at work will affect the things that happen at work. So it's kind of got this reciprocal thing going on. And that's important to know, and that's why emotions are really important. And it works like this, of course, in areas besides just at work. This happens in our daily life. This is a common theory of social psychology, kind of going into almost that self-fulfilling prophecy territory, where the way you think and feel is going to affect how you behave, which will affect what happens, which will affect how you think and feel. So affective events theory is kind of that applied. And to be very specific, the term affective event refers to an interaction with something at work or a person at work, and that will result in your affective reaction. And if you remember, in the context of psychology, affect pretty much just means emotion. So from there, we go into how, as we discussed early on in this lecture, an emotion is a positively or negatively valenced affective state resulting from an event, which is characterized by intense feelings and awareness of the cause of the emotion. So we are able to kind of make a judgment about how we feel based on something that happens because we're aware of that happening. If we delve deeper into this in social psychology, you'll find that there are theories that say that the emotion occurs first and then we attribute meaning to it later, but that is kind of maybe up for debate. This one more is saying that we are aware of the event and the event caused the specific emotion. And of course, emotions are short-lived, so they usually occur immediately after the event, but the emotions can then turn into moods, which then can turn into affective states and attitudes. And attitudes are specifically targeted. Remember, we said that at the beginning as well. They usually focus in on a specific thing. So your emotion could be broader than just how you feel in that moment, but an attitude has a target. So my attitude is therefore something like job satisfaction, where you're talking about it's an attitude towards a job. And you're gonna have psychophysiological arousal, meaning both psychological and physiological arousal occur when you're experiencing a strong attitude or affect. So this is an interesting little kind of chart that was originally proposed by the same people who proposed affective events theory. I encourage you to take kind of a look at it because it's interesting. Don't require you guys to know a ton about it, but it's definitely something worth paying a little bit of attention to because it shows how you kind of have a positive and a negative attitude and then an active versus a kind of unactive state, and how that can interact and work. So from there, I'm gonna say we're gonna stop this little section, and I'll see you again in the next video.